Hello, class and other random internet people. And if I'm really lucky, government officials. Uh, so, a little bit of my background. I'm a community college professor here in Northwest Arkansas. I also used to be a geologist. I worked for the state, and I used to live in Alaska and Hawaii, and did fun things up there, and certainly kind of dealt with living with earthquakes in Alaska, which is the most earthquake-prone place in our country. Yes, that includes California. There's like 3 times the amount or 4 times the amount of earthquakes in Alaska as there are in California. Part of that's because Alaska is a big place. What I want to focus on here is talking about the New Madrid seismic zone here, kind of in the middle of the country and kind of northeastern Arkansas. I don't want to get too deep into the weeds with what's going on here geologically or kind of the end of the world scenario kind of stuff. Well, I guess I am going to get into that a little bit, but there's a lot of information out there about this area and how it could be a really major natural disaster for this country in a very large region. But I will just say, if you want to go to somewhere to get good information on this, this guy here on YouTube called Deep Dive did a video on this a few years ago. Just search for New Madrid earthquake, or do Deep Dive earthquake, whatever. It'll pop up. It's a little over a half-hour video, but it's just fantastic. It goes into the historical earthquakes of the New Madrid seismic zone, when they occurred, the geology sort of this region, and how it really differs. An earthquake in this region, how it really differs from earthquakes in other areas, because really it can be dependent upon the type of subsurface geology you have in the region, and you know things that may happen here that we don't normally see with other earthquakes along more active boundaries, like on the west coast. Things like sand blows, which are basically gigantic explosions coming out of the ground in places like this due to liquefaction. Again, go watch the video, it goes into it and talks about it. So, good background information there. And I want to kind of just give a little bit of explanation for what you might feel with an earthquake like this, and then kind of jump into thinking about sort of emergency response with it. So this map is a Mercalli scale map. You are probably aware of the Richter scale, right? Like a 5.5 or 7.5 or 7.0 or whatever. That's the stuff we see in the news when we hear about earthquakes. I'd argue that that information is almost useless that you get from the news. It really doesn't tell you a whole heck of a lot. The measurement on the Richter scale is basically a measurement of the amount of energy that happens when an earthquake occurs. It doesn't really tell me anything about the shaking. You might be a little bit aware of this when you hear about tsunamis potentially happening in the Pacific. You can have a big earthquake, but they're like, oh, is there a tsunami? I don't know. We have to wait and see. Excuse me. A better scale, I think, is something called the Mercalli scale. There's a little more to it, and it's kind of a relative scale versus, qualitative versus quantitative. That Richter scale is very quantitative. It tells you the amount of energy that happens at the epicenter, at the single point where the earthquake occurs. The Mercalli scale is more about what you feel. And what you feel also determines the amount of damage you have, depending on where you're at. I can claim I've felt like a 7.0 or 7.5 earthquake when I used to live in Alaska. That's pretty crazy. Except I was like 100 miles away, and what I felt was not nearly the same thing that somebody felt that was on top of that epicenter. On the Mercalli scale side of things, I felt, I think, like a 4 to a 5. The building definitely shook, and I ran outside in my boxers in Anchorage, Alaska in the middle of winter. It was that kind of shaking. But I didn't really have any serious damage to my house at the time. So this is a simulated New Madrid seismic zone earthquake. If it were a 7.5 on the Richter scale, but it's showing you sort of the Mercalli scale and what you might feel with the shaking. So we can kind of zoom in here and click on these contours. And, as you go across northern Arkansas, you can see it kind of gets down to the 4.5 to 4 range for northwest Arkansas, which is where I am and where most of my students are. So what's that mean on the Mercalli scale? So you can kind of see the scale over here on the other side of the map, from like a 1 to a 10 in Roman numerals. Okay, what's that actually mean? Well, the 1 to the 3 is the sort of, you can barely feel it. Maybe the pictures on the wall kind of shake sort of thing. Or you're like, oh, yeah, felt an earthquake. Kind of crazy. When you get to the 4, 5, 6s, then things are really starting to shake. You're worried about things breaking. When you're kind of in that 6 territory, you're worried about your foundation. Frankly, in the 5 territory, I'm worried about the 4 territory. I'm worried about my foundation. My house sits up a little bit. I do pay for earthquake insurance. I pay about $5 a month. Insurance companies don't think there's a high likelihood that my house is ever going to have an earthquake where it could do potential damage because we don't really feel large earthquakes here. However, back to that first map. This is an earthquake hazard map from the USGS. Boy, there's a big old bullseye right there in this part of the country. So there is some concern on the scientific side of things that this could occur, but maybe less concern from an insurance company kind of standpoint. And frankly, if there'd be a whole other problem because if you had an earthquake of this kind of magnitude, of a 7.5 in this part of the country, it would bankrupt a lot of the insurance companies. So the federal government would have to get involved with a lot of the recovery, financially. So yeah, so 1 to 3, meh. 4 to 6, eef. 7 and up, you're talking some pretty major damage, houses and buildings collapsing kind of thing. So back to that map. So yeah, this could be pretty bad. Go watch that video for details, but there's a lot of sand in through this area. Liquefaction is a huge problem. If you get a 7.5 here, you're talking about buildings falling over in Memphis due to liquefaction. I'm not even saying crumbling and apart. I mean literally falling over. Similar situation potentially going all up to St. Louis. If we see earthquake, if we potentially see an earthquake that's even stronger than that, God forbid, like an 8.0 or more, you're going to be pushing this Mercalli scale out more. You're going to feel a lot more. And then cities out here towards Little Rock, Nashville, and even farther are going to be seeing some serious damage because they're just not built for earthquakes. Memphis has a little bit more of updated regulations in terms of buildings since like the 1990s. So hopefully there'd be less problems there. But in terms of estimated, how bad this might be, we have seen estimates via FEMA and other organizations as to damage. So you're talking upwards of 3,000 more people dying, 86,000 casualties, hundreds of thousands of buildings getting damaged, 7.2 million people getting displaced. You're thinking 7 million refugees within the middle of the United States, and they have to go somewhere. I moved down to Baton Rouge in southern Louisiana a year after Katrina. I saw the social problems down in Baton Rouge because a lot of people had to move up out of New Orleans and into Baton Rouge. I had trouble finding an apartment. Rates were through the roof. The police were overstretched. Other infrastructure is overstretched because all of a sudden you had thousands of people that all of a sudden moved into Baton Rouge very quickly over a short period of time. This would be on a whole other level of problem. So you're talking about, minor to moderate sort of governmental problems in this area with the refugee crisis. You'd have crime problems ramping up because of that. Oh boy. But that's not even the major problem that I'm getting to here yet, and the part that I don't think people are concerned with. So there's kind of your shake map, what you might expect. So catastrophic damage here, sort of within the middle of this area, and damage potentially extending on that. You'd have all sorts of landslides here. In Arkansas, you'd potentially see the city of Harrison cut off, or some of these other areas that are in the Ozarks. Maybe even similar problems down here in the Ouachitas or over out here in some of the more mountainous areas in Tennessee and whatnot. So yeah, huge problem in lots of places. Accessibility is a major issue. So okay, let's pretend this earthquake happens. Boom, earthquake happens, 7.5. What occurs? Okay, if you're in this area, you're trying not to die. If you're in these other areas, you're trying to figure out how to go get groceries and get your power back on, and hopefully your water lines don't break and all that stuff. your necessities for survival here within this region are problematic, right? However, there will be emergency response. The local police, local firefighters, they're there. They're going to help out. National Guard is going to get deployed on a very big scale. The Army's probably going to get leaned on to as well. They're going to come in there, hopefully within a few weeks, a few days to a few weeks. If you want to see what happened with Hurricane Helene over here, there's great stories here on YouTube of people talking about kind of the response there. And yeah, they'll be there to make sure you survive, but they're not necessarily going to be there to help you kind of rebuild or anything. So in the immediate term, you're probably going to get help. You're probably not going to starve. But after that, it's going to be problematic. So earthquake happens, big emergency response. Okay, cool. Everybody's surviving. We're getting everything rebuilt. It's going to suck. It's going to be literally probably $1 trillion or more in damage. The financial side of this is going to be rough, but hey, we'll survive. We can deal with big hurricanes. This is like a big hurricane times 10, but maybe we can deal with this, right? Right? Here's what isn't understood, I think, with large earthquakes on the emergency services side of things, and certainly the government side of things. I'm not an anti-government kind of person. I'm an anti-you kind of person, because you don't care enough about doing your civic duty to make sure our government officials are well informed enough. So go vote, and don't vote based on vibes. Read people's resumes, figure out what they've done. Because I have seen firsthand, working for the government, how small problems turn into big problems because leaders don't have an expertise in anything. Or they don't know how to find people with expertise and put them into important positions. So, what about a big earthquake here, and how it's really not just one singular event? I want to take you to the major earthquake that happened in Japan in 2011. This is a great sort of graphic representation of this. And I'm just going to hit play here. So what you're seeing is these little red dots are just earthquakes that are naturally happening around Japan. We have the year up here, 2011. It's February, the second month, and the day of the month here. So you're going a day every second or two. The bigger the circle, the bigger the earthquake. We have this specific plate down here subducting underneath Japan, so this is kind of an earthquake-prone zone. And then, as we get towards the beginning of March, it's not just one earthquake, is it? I really like the line that they show here on this video. You're seeing the rate of earthquakes, and you see the rate jump way up as you have that one earthquake. You do have a list here. You don't need to read Japanese. You do have a list here of the larger earthquakes that occur. So daily almost, you're getting 5.0, 6.0 aftershocks that are happening. And every week or so, you're getting another 7.0 or, another large earthquake that's occurring during this time period. And again, look at the date. We are a month ahead of when this event occurred, and you're still having very large aftershocks. This is a tectonic event. The plate is on the move and moving along tons and tons and tons of small faults, and the shaking is continuous. Japan has infrastructure and emergency services and responses to deal with this because it's a part of daily life there, and it's been that way for centuries. The middle part of our country is not prepared for this, and they certainly aren't prepared to deal with a reoccurring event. You are going to have large earthquakes occurring here long after the... look, no, there's another large one I just saw. It's a problem. I think you get the idea I'm trying to push home here. You can't just come in there and save everybody and everything's fine. You're going to keep having earthquakes that are going to continue to break things that maybe didn't even break on the first earthquake. You're going to continue to have to repair water lines, sewage lines, electrical lines, keeping the lights on, keeping the grid up. is going to be a major problem. Look at that, another 7.3, and you're in July here. You're 4 or 5 months after the event, and you're still having large earthquakes in this region. That is the thing that kind of keeps me up at night. One reason why I think this doesn't get talked about a lot, because this is just one of those events where I think it's like, well, it's just going to be so bad we can't really prepare for it. I think it kind of gets lumped into events like Yellowstone. If Yellowstone ever pops as a supervolcano, whatever, what are we going to do? It's just, we'll do what we can. It's just so catastrophic. You can't really spend a lot of time thinking about it or spending money on it because, the country and the planet has other problems we have to deal with. I think that's not wise. I think from a math perspective, a probability perspective, that's not wise. Yellowstone is not going to pop off in our lifetimes. We know enough about it now because there was concern, right? There's all this hand waving that happened in the early 2000s via the Discovery and the History Channel about, it's the end of the world, oh no, when we're overdue. We've studied it more now. Science has come a long way since then. And we can say, and the geophysicists that work on that and volcanologists that work on that will tell you, no, will not happen in our lifetimes. And if you disagree with me, I'll show you the interviews where they said otherwise. So Yellowstone, not going to happen in our lifetimes, and any given century after that, 1 in 100,000 chance of happening or something, 1 in a million, something like that. What are the chances of this occurring in our lifetimes? Well, we've been able to tease back some geologic history here, and we know roughly how long between large earthquake events that happen here. It is tough, I think, to estimate those. I'm not going to go into that science, but based on that, the kind of estimates and probabilities we see are, for magnitude 6.0 within a 50-year time period, 25 to 40%. And I think if you up this to like a 7.0, you're talking about maybe like a 10% chance. Jump that up to like a 100-year time period, like more of a full lifetime. It's a significant chance. You're dancing around a coin flip kind of event. That is a high likelihood. I think it's worth it to spend some effort talking about this kind of event, understanding the kind of problems that are going to be ran into, and what we would need to do on like a national level to deal with this. You're looking at an area that is, if this is a 7.5, if this, God forbid, gets up to like 8.0 territory, you're looking at an area of the country that for potentially up to a year could be uninhabitable, at least from an off-grid kind of standpoint, or needing a grid sort of standpoint and all the infrastructure and everything that you need. That's a huge problem. I think we should be talking about, how are these communities around this area gonna deal with the influx of refugees within our own country? How could other cities deal with that? FEMA can be talking about this. How could other cities help out other cities to deal with this kind of a problem? Because all of a sudden you're going to have tons of people being displaced. Yeah, the immediate emergency response, we can keep people, sheltered and fed and hydrated without too much difficulty, I think. But when you start getting into the more immediate term time frames, you run into much larger problems. Or you start to run into the kind of bigger problems that you can't really deal with. And there's the whole problem of great, I pay for earthquake insurance. Okay, well, if now all of a sudden my insurance company ceases to exist because everybody needs tens of thousands of dollars because their house in this area is gone, now what? What are the financial mechanisms on the federal side of things to be able to deal with that? So these are things that I think should be talked about. FEMA should talk about this. Local municipalities that are within this area, I think, should be talking about this. And it has repercussions for other types of natural disasters like Hurricane Helene, right? Major hurricane that comes through that's sort of unprecedented. And hey, we're starting to see events like that are unprecedented. That is in our natural disaster lexicon now, that there's another 500-year flood every year in some of these areas. So I think it's important to discuss this, and it's why I'm kind of pointing this out, because it isn't just a singular event. It is something that happens over a time frame. So feel free to comment here. I'm going to stick this on my YouTube. You students, I'm going to throw this into an announcement, or I'll integrate this into my courses more as the future goes on. Ask me questions about this. Give me insights if you're somebody that knows more about this than I do, because I am not a seismologist. I don't know a ton about the history about this. I'm kind of a general geologist and historical geologist. So give me your thoughts if you've got experiences in emergency services. I'd love to kind of know some of your perspectives on this. Add this to the comments. There's a non-zero chance that my former coworkers end up watching this, or people at the state of Arkansas watch this in the future, and this could get passed around. Probably not, but it could. I don't know. So yeah, with that, I'll say thanks for watching, thanks for learning, and share important stuff like this. And for my students, I will see you in class.